Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to do another episode of Hot Takes. This time I'm going to be talking about Stoneskin, my least favorite set in the game. For those of you who've been following me for a decent amount of time, you may have heard me here or there talk about how I'm very anti-Stoneskin. I don't use the set above 4 pieces on any champions on my account. That's just a personal preference, not a decree or mandate for other people to follow suit, but because basically all of my enemies use Stoneskin, but it's just a personal decision. I just don't like that set, but we'll come back to why that is. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about Stoneskin, the problem that I think it has caused or has brought into the game, and my fix for it, because I don't like to just complain into the ether. I like to provide potential solutions for things I have a problem with in the game. So as a quick refresher, let's take a look at the set bonus for Stoneskin itself. Here at 1 piece you get 8% HP, 2 piece you get 40% resistance, 3 pieces you get 15% defense, 4 piece you get the Stoneskin buff at the start of the round for 1 turn, and there's a 50% chance of blocking removals or steals of the buff, meaning that it's 50-50 chance that even if you try to strip it or reduce the duration or anything like that, it'll just do nothing regardless of the amount of accuracy you have on your champions and regardless of the amount of resistance the enemy has. At 5 pieces you get 15% more defense. At 6 pieces you get the Stoneskin buff for 2 turns, same chance to block the removals or steals. If you go beyond that into the accessories or mix and match with the accessories, 7 pieces you get more HP, 8 pieces you get more resistance, and 9 pieces you get a bigger shield, because Stoneskin is effectively a shield that makes you really immune. I think you take 85% less damage or less physical damage, which is why it's so hard to break through. So it's effectively an impenetrable shield. But of course, as most of you should know by now, you can also you can burn it or you can bomb through it to get through it, and you can also just take the 50-50 chance to try and remove it. So to help provide some context for my opinions on the Stoneskin set, we do have to take a trip down memory lane and talk about the evolving arena meta over the course of Raid's history, because of course there was a time long ago, long before Hydra existed, long before Doom Tower existed, long before CVC existed, where we got a bunch of different things that have kind of shifted the meta here and there. So let's talk about the arena meta circa 4 years ago, roughly 1 year after I started playing, and what I'll call the original, the OG speed meta. Of course, we do have the new age speed meta going on right now, which we'll come back to a bit later, but originally we just had the OG speed meta. We didn't have many of the current meta sets in the game, and we also didn't have a lot of champions who have, really strong passes for keeping your team or themselves alive, and so speed was king. So the team that went first was the team that won basically 90-something% of the time, because go second teams were not yet a thing, or at least they were really hard to pull off until things changed a bit later. So basically everyone ran what we call a cleave team, which I can demonstrate for you against this lovely one-man defense, but it was basically this, and I still run this, to speed farm teams like this. You have a speed boost to kick things off. Most people used Arbiter because of course of her speed aura. You have a debuffer in the team to strip their buffs and or place decreased defense and or weaken. Then you have some nuker to clean up the mess, and then you have a 4th slot that's kind of flex. Some people run that as CC, so that could be lockout like a warlord way back in the day. It could be a Kymar for the buff strip and the sleep, or it could have been a double speed booster composition, so you'd see a lot of Arbiter Lady Kimmy, Arbiter Lysandra, little Lysandra Sify, other combinations of that where you double boost, make sure that you go first, debuff, and then nuke. So we'll go ahead and run this just as an example in the background, but this was the meta. So if you went first like we did, go first against this particular speed on the Arbiter, then we would win the fight no matter what, and that was kind of GG. So if you didn't go first, you were literally last, and it was a very terrible experience, I have to admit, way back then coming from that regime. So the first instance of Plarium trying to combat the speed meta that was king back then was the introduction of reaction accessories with CVC, and a good example for me is my Mithrala Lifebane here, who has triple reaction, for example. So it's really hard to crit her because there is a 75% chance that it will turn it into a normal hit when you try to attack her the first time. So this was their first answer to the speed meta, and this definitely changed the game. Now, it took a long time for this to kind of spread throughout the entire community. It was CVC is obviously kind of a whale and Kraken spend off, so to speak, and so it kind of trickled down over time, and eventually normal people got reaction accessories as well. But that basically flipped the meta entirely, and we entered what I would call the slow meta, where everyone was super super slow because so many champions were in reaction. It didn't really matter what the stats were, you just put reaction on because that was the best way at the time to have a air quotes go second team. So you'd go into your fight, speed boost, buff strip, debuff, and nuke, and then you'd hit reaction and your big nuke is gone. They'd come around and they kill you because they just survived the hit because of reaction. So we had the slow meta where a lot of the nukers were super slow in reaction as well to stay alive, and so that they could try and preserve their life force by just having and trusting in the faith or putting faith in reaction. And so we had a really slow tanky meta kind of develop after that. Fast forward a little bit and we have the release of Hydra Clan Boss, which of course introduced Stoneskin into the game, and that basically solidified the slow meta for a long time. And that also introduced the stall meta where you have, you know, the UDKs and Sickabee Stoneskin, super slow, super annoying, you can barely do anything to break it, and so that kind of, you know, compounded the effect of the slow meta. You have reaction combined with Stoneskin, and then it just everyone tried to go super slow because you had to wait out Stoneskin and you really couldn't do much to deal with it reliably. Now of course this got even worse when they added in Hydra Clash and the introduction of accessories for Stoneskin and protection, and so now you had a way to kind of diversify your build a bit further. It was a lot easier to get more pieces of Stoneskin because you could add in the accessories as well, so it was a lot easier to get to 6 pieces, for example, versus just having all 6 pieces be just artifacts. However, on the flip side, it is worth noting that it also did introduce the 4-piece meta that we kind of see nowadays still, where you have 4-piece Stoneskin and 4-piece some other set, just because you can have Stoneskin on the accessories. Now throughout this whole period, initially you could use bombs into Stoneskin, and that was a extremely reliable way to go about it if you happen to have a bomb champion. At the time, that's when they released Gaius the Gleeful coming into that, as well as Nishak Vermalord, I think a Christmas fusion from a couple years ago. But we had 2, you know, somewhat accessible champions who kind of came in and helped deal with Stoneskin to some degree. Eventually they added the capacity for HP burn to help you burn off Stoneskin, which again helped. But then they kind of threw all of that away when they added polymorph, or the blessing systems in general, but polymorph more specifically. And that basically, as we all know, killed debuffers for a long time, including bombers, including HP burners, because you can try to get rid of Stoneskin and you're really likely to get turned into a sheep. You miss your turn and basically you lose the fight. It's GG over from there. So bombers kind of fell off, debuffers fell off, and thus Stoneskin got an effective buff from polymorph, because now you couldn't risk trying to strip it, bomb it, or burn it without getting turned into a sheep and potentially just losing the fight trying to deal with Stoneskin, or you would just be stuck fighting into a team with Stoneskin. You can't do anything against it and they kill you because they were slower or whatever. They had to deal with your team. They just survive your initial onslaught because they're in Stoneskin. And so it was a very miserable experience, as you might be picking up by now. So now if we fast forward to the current day, obviously polymorph has seen a couple of nerfs here and there over the years that have definitely helped combat the overall problem, but the real impact was the introduction of the pinpoint set, which of course allows you, and the feral set in fairness, but they allow you to kind of bypass a little bit of the polymorph aspect of the game, because pinpoint can protect you from CC, including polymorph or sheep. And so that was a very strong way to give some power back to debuffers, and you'll see a lot of Stoneskin / pinpoint on your Fabians, on your Armands, Gizmax, Nishaks, Commoduses. You kind of get the idea. So pinpoint feral gear came in and helped offer some counterplay to the polymorph problem, and thus as a result of that, we've seen polymorph be kind of deprioritized as the #1 blessing to put on champions, specifically for PvP. In addition, considering that both of these sets offered you speed from accessories, that kind of revamped or reignited the speed meta that we are currently in as well. And so for the current state of Stoneskin, obviously with the speed meta, if you go fast enough, that gives you a lot of power in today's meta. You can try and lock them out, you can try and strip the Stoneskin, you can try and bomb it and burn it off, as long as you have pinpoint on your appropriate champions. And so there's a lot of ways to kind of get around the fact that champions can just kind of sit there under an impenetrable shield, or relatively impenetrable shield. However, if you don't go first, or you don't have a bomb champion, you don't have a burn champion, you don't have really good pinpoint gear, you don't have a lockout, you can definitely be screwed by just a champion sitting on, you know, the Georgid sitting there under Stoneskin. You try to strip it off, you fail, and then he kills your entire team. Or, you know, insert any nuker there, that can happen as long as they're under Stoneskin. Stoneskin, and it's especially more oppressive on mythicals because it can buy them that one turn they need to change forms and do something really terrible potentially against your champions and their alternative forms. So Stoneskin is still very powerful. It's still the meta, and I still absolutely have a problem with it. And so that brings us back to the main topic of today's video. What is my fix for Stoneskin in its current state? To put it succinctly, my primary problem with Stoneskin is that it's a very low risk investment for a relatively high payoff in terms of the utility, and I think that's just a little bit too strong, on top of having some RNG in the mix as well to kind of make it a pain to try and deal with reliably. And so my primary fix is just to get rid of this 50% chance of blocking removals or steals. Again, I think it adds a little bit too much RNG into the mix. I want to be able to strip off your Stoneskin if you don't build your champions with resistance, which most people don't, because it's just kind of on everyone at this point, and people don't necessarily prioritize resistance. Now, granted, I understand that when it comes to the balance of accuracy versus resistance, accuracy does have an advantage. For anyone who doesn't know, there is a formula. You can probably find it online as far as accuracy versus resistance, but it roughly boils down to that you need about 30 accuracy above your enemy's resistance to land your debuffs around 90 or do your effects 90 something percent of the time. Whereas on the flip side, you need about 90 resistance above your enemy's accuracy to somewhat reliably resist debuffs being placed on you. And let's not forget that with the addition of mythicals, and it's also existing on some legendaries, there is the new capability to ignore resistance, so that gives an even more powerful advantage towards accuracy. So I do totally understand that there's already that inherent skew of accuracy versus resistance, making it very difficult to build your champions with high resistance and have them reliably resist someone who's really trying to debuff. But that's exactly where my proposal will come in. So I would still like to see this 50% chance completely removed, but in its stead, the 4-piece set effect would still give you the Stoneskin buff at the start of the round for one turn, but instead of the latter part, I would exchange this to kind of treat it like one of the more recent gemstones we've had, where you get an extra 50 resistance when the enemies try to strip a Stoneskin off of you or try to steal it. Now, 50 is definitely an arbitrary number. That could be 100, could be 75, could be whatever player might think is appropriate, but essentially it would give you that edge so that if someone tries to remove it and you've built your champion with some amount of reasonable amount of resistance, then you still have an extra chance to kind of resist it being stolen. Because I initially read Stoneskin as this is meant to be a tank set. You have resistance, you have HP, you have defense. You're supposed to put this on absolute units to keep them alive, your healers, supports, revivers types, but because of just the literally impossibility of hitting through Stoneskin, it's kind of been adopted on everyone across the board because it just keeps them alive for one turn, which could turn the tide of a fight. So essentially, I would like to turn this into this gemstone here, this legendary one, where this one gives you extra 30% resistance against attempts to place CC, but instead it would be 50, 75, 100, whatever the appropriate number is, extra resistance in place when enemies would try to strip it off. That way, it would still have to pass an accuracy versus resistance check, but it would encourage the resistance meta to kind of come back into the mix, or at least encourage people to build resistance on their people in Stoneskin and not just have them in Stoneskin for the sake of it. And we'd potentially see a lot less Stoneskin on nukers just to keep them alive, and this would be reserved, as I see it, again, for tanks. You can disagree with me in the comment section down below. This is just a proposal. These are just my opinions, so you do not have to necessarily agree with them, but I'd be keen to know if you do in the comment section down below. So continuing on here, the 6-piece set effect, basically kind of continuing on or piggybacking off of the initial proposal, you'd still get Stoneskin for 2 turns, and instead of the 50% chance, you'd get an extra 50, 60, 75, 100, whatever the number is, resistance to try and strip it. So if you did invest in the full 6-piece Stoneskin, let's just say 100 resistance, for example, set it to the extreme value, you'd have an extra 200 resistance whenever they would try to strip it off, meaning that, again, if you're built with a somewhat decent amount of resistance, an extra 200 resistance if they try to remove it basically means it's going to stay there outside of the random 3% chances. So again, trying to reinvigorate resistance in the meta and tie it to the Stoneskin set, as I believe they kind of intended it to be initially, but who knows what's in their minds. Now, in order to not make Stoneskin too weak relative to bombs and burns, perhaps we could extend that set effect, the same principle of the extra resistance whenever your opponents try to strip. We can say whenever your opponents try to strip your buffs or strip the Stoneskin buff off, or apply burns and or bombs to you. So again, giving you that bonus resistance to try and resist whenever an enemy tries to deal with Stoneskin. But that would involve you having to invest in resistance in the build in the Stoneskin to make that happen. And you just can't slap it on your nuker, squishy nuker with 200 resistance, meaning that under normal circumstances, that champion would get absolutely blown up because they have no resistance. But that being said, if all of that is too extreme of a change and you're not really on board, I do have a kind of a middle ground and olive branch to extend here, because again, my primary gripe with Stoneskin, I mean, I have many, but my primary gripe with Stoneskin is this 50% chance to block removals. I would just say for the 4-piece set, drop this down to 25%. So that way there's a 75% chance that if you only have one turn Stoneskin, I'm more likely to remove it than you are to keep it, and that would help kind of combat when you go into a fight, everyone's in one turn Stoneskin and one turn something else or whatever, and you try to strip it off, you strip none of them because you rolled 50-50 negative 4 times in a row, and then you get clapped because nothing happened and you didn't do any of your abilities, or you can't use any of your abilities. That would just help boost your offensive capability going into the one turn Stoneskin, but you would still maintain the 50% chance, the full 50% chance, if you invested all the way in the 6-piece Stoneskin, i.e. the 2-turn Stoneskin set. The other independent change that I would like to see addresses my other grievance with Stoneskin, which is that there's too little of a risk when you use it and a really, really high payoff when it works in your favor. So I would like to see a change, and that could be on top of the other 2 versions of the proposals that I provided already. But if you manage to break Stoneskin, that could be from damage, could be from bombs, not necessarily from stripping it, but if you manage to break through it, destroy it, then the champion who was under the Stoneskin, you get like stunned or you get petrified. You kind of keep maybe with the Stoneskin name, that maybe they could be petrified, you can get feared or something like that, something to punish you for trying to sit there under Stoneskin, but actually having it be broken through damage, bombs, or burns. Because currently your reward for managing to break through Stoneskin is an enemy champion who's at full HP and basically full turn meter, because another hidden aspect of the set effect is that you cannot reduce their turn meter while the buff, Stoneskin buff, is active. I think that would introduce a decent amount of counterplay, meaning that you're now kind of risking it by running Stoneskin versus it just being an extremely easy way to survive for one turn in a fight. So essentially what I would like to see done to the Stoneskin set is to increase the risk associated with using the set while also reducing some of the RNG surrounding stripping it, but also throwing a bone to resistance overall in PvP meta, because it's definitely struggling nowadays relative to accuracy. As we talked about, the formula is heavily skewed towards accuracy anyways, and then when you start adding in ignored resistance, it is even more heavily skewed towards accuracy. So it would be trying to throw a bone towards more resistance builds to make it work on certain champions, not everyone, of course. But like I said earlier, this is just my opinion, this is just my proposal, so feel free to disagree with me or agree with me in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts on Stoneskin. Do you even see Stoneskin as a problem, or do you see it as a tool to kind of break into the current meta of PvP? What do you think of my proposals, or do you have some proposals of your own to try and change or adapt Stoneskin to be a little bit less powerful and a little bit less pervasive in the current meta? Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below, and as always, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to hit the like button and feel free to subscribe to the channel as well if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching my TED Talk / rant, and have a good one.